Assume there'll be a vaccine. Will it come too late to restore the Arkansas economy that we knew? Assume now that it won't. What sort of commercial landscape will a new year reveal? Assume now that a new presidential administration, will debut in January. What will that mean for Arkansas agriculture and manufacturing? Now assume there's another Washington aid package. What and who does it need to target? And will it arrive in time? A look ahead to the dollars and cents of 2021. Coming up on Arkansas Week.
Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and KUAR-FM 89.
Hello again, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us. We hope your weekend is as safe and satisfying as possible under the circumstances. A pandemic doesn't make for the safest nor most satisfying of Thanksgiving holidays. Another holiday now looms, one that usually spells good news for retailers. Beyond that, a new year awaits. We are in no small measure, of course, tied to a national and global economy and to an epidemic. That noted, what can business and agriculture in Arkansas expect in 2021? We'll spend the half hour peeking around the corner, as we may. Joining us, Dr. Mark Cochran, Vice President of the University of Arkansas's Agriculture Division. Jeremy Horpedahl of the University of Central Arkansas's Economic Research Center. And Edward Haddock is District Director of the U.S. Small Business Administration in Arkansas. Gentlemen, thanks very much for coming aboard. Dr. Cochran, why don't we begin with you and then run the table, so to speak. What an assessment, an end-of-the-year assessment for where Arkansas stands economically. It has been a very eventful year.
Yeah, this has been a very interesting year, to say the least, and it's a year that's not over yet. So there's probably some more excitement for us to be had with it. But the state's economy has followed some degree of the national trends, but we do have a little bit different structure here that makes us somewhat unique. Agriculture is our largest single industry, and it plays a bigger role in the state's economy than it would at the national level off of it. But we've got the vaccine that's coming forward. We've got the election and the changes in policy that may be resulting here. And we've got an awful lot of uncertainty on both of those fronts that would impact the industry. I think we're all ready for this to be over, but we probably still have a ride or two left on the roller coaster before it's all said and done.
Well, I would assume, but at the end, or approaching anyway, the end of the year, how stands the Arkansas farmer and rancher?
Well, you can't be in particularly a farmer and in production agriculture if you don't have some degree of optimism. And if you don't have that optimism, you do something like become a college professor. But our farmers, this has been a tough year, both from the growing conditions that we've had and the prices, and then the uncertainty that we've received off of it. There are some signs that we're starting to come back a little bit, particularly with some of our row crop markets that shown some signs of recovery here. But it's been a tough year, and much like some of the other sectors in the economy that have been impacted by COVID, the government transfers have become a very significant part of the overall income from agriculture to keep us to where we are today.
About $100 billion, I believe, is it not, Doctor? Am I correct there, anecdotally?
About that.
Yeah, Jeremy Horpedahl.
I think going forward, that we really live in an economy that is now very much dependent on how this virus situation is handled. I think a lot of people talk about whether there'll be more government shutdowns of business, things of that nature. But for the most part, data I've looked at, people are worried whether there are shutdowns or not. Restaurants are not operating at the capacity level that the state has even set. So what we need, and the big unknown now is, will this pandemic get worse in Arkansas and worse in the nation? As it does, I think the economy just continues to go down with it. We've seen good recovery since the lows of April and May. Unemployment rate continues to go down, including in Arkansas. We're slightly below the national average. But I think all that can change very quickly if people become even more afraid of the health effects of this pandemic.
Well, with a vaccine still, or its wide distribution anyway, acceptance and distribution, actually months away, when you say the economy tends to go with it, and we're surging now, doesn't, Jeremy, it's not terribly reassuring, I must say.
No, I'm sorry, I do not bring good news from the dismal science today, but I think the reality is, like you said, the vaccine, it's great news, and I think it's increased consumer confidence to some extent. It's helped the stock market in the short term, but I think it's still a ways off. And for not only for people to be vaccinated, but for those vaccines to start actually slowing down the spread of the virus. And I think that's what we need to look for. And to the extent that we can protect businesses in the short term, but also protect health, we have to do all the things we can do that are in that type of general strategy.
Yeah, Edward Haddock.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what we don't know is what we don't know, and exactly that. The COVID pandemic is getting worse. It's how worse will it get? How much worse down that road are we going to be headed? I think the economic slowdown that we've seen from a traditional shutdown and closing of trying to deal with the pandemic has certainly eased up, but it's spread out a bit wider than narrow and deep. So I think as we look at the monetary policy of the Fed and continuing to pump money into the economy, SBA over the past 6 months has put in just over $4.5 billion into the Arkansas small business economy to help these businesses weather that storm moving forward. But I think as we see more pressures coming into our government on trying to deal with the health side of this pandemic, our small businesses are in obviously an uncertain environment to where this end may be.
Well, the betting seems to be that there will possibly be an additional aid package within months. But now, as we prepare this broadcast anyway, a few days before December, it appears that there is a fight brewing or has broken out between the Fed and the Treasury on several $1 billion worth of aid money that the present administration wants back. That just lends even more uncertainty to the situation.
That's absolutely. I think as we're looking at moving forward here, until we can get consensus on where we go politically and trying to bring folks together, SBA, I know, is willing and ready to support another round of PPP funding and additional CARES Act relief to our small businesses. I think we need to make sure we get targeted funding. And we make sure we align that with a strategy to help control the spread and impact of this virus throughout our nation.
Dr. Cochran, let's go back to you for just a second, then we'll run the board again. Let's assume that a vaccine is widely available by April, May, by mid-2021, and people and consumer confidence is back to something akin to normal, or at least growing again. What kind of economy are we going to be looking at here?
Well, if you look at the Bureau of Economic Analysis statistics on personal income and outlays off of it, I think it becomes very dramatic as to how this has hit the service industry. We had the drop off in March in particular, and then to some degree in April in terms of expending on services, durables, both durable and non-durable off of it. The goods market has come back to some extent off it, but it's a service industry that's really been hit hard. So you've got things like the entertainment industry, you've got the food service industry that impacts particularly our poultry processing industry within the state of Arkansas. Retail, traditional sales off of it, your small businesses like dry cleaners, barbershops, those types of enterprises off of it. the overall spending in September was back to within 1.5% of where we were in 2019, but the service industry is off by still a 7 to 8% margin. So it's those ones that need to come through. And if you look at the incomes, by the time you count in the transfers, we're back about in the aggregate about where we were, but the aggregates sometimes hide. There's a lot of things that are hidden in the aggregate numbers as we go through. I think our state's economy is going to have to see some of that return to normalcy, to where those service industry jobs will come back, that's been so hit with our unemployment and how it's been concentrated off of it. And I think that's going to be the secret to us coming back to where we were before. And as we've all pointed out, there's a lot of sources of uncertainty, from government policy to the way the vaccine is going to be distributed and the impact that it's going to have, to a lot of other things, including trade. That we have a high proportion of our total counties in the state of Arkansas that have economies that are very influenced by international trade. And that's something that concerns us in agriculture as we move.
Yeah, Jeremy Horpedahl, no question about it. Hospitality, entertainment has just really been clobbered in the last year.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we look at overall consumer spending, as was just mentioned, in Arkansas, it's about even or slightly up from where it was before the pandemic. But there's been a big shift in the composition. And what we've seen is that, people are still eating, obviously, but they're eating much more from grocery stores. Spending there is way up. And spending in the hospitality industry is down about 10%. We can see it in the employment numbers, too, of the net loss in jobs in Arkansas since the pandemic. About a third of those jobs have just been in restaurants and bars. So we've seen that be very much that effect hitting very hard there. And nationally, we're down about 10 million jobs from where we were before the pandemic. So there's still a long way to go. And the industries that have been most negatively affected, such as restaurants and travel and hospitality, they are not going to be probably seeing a recovery until that vaccine is widely distributed in the population.
Well, I note the latest Arkansas figures indicate we dropped a full percentage point in terms of unemployment, but size of the labor pool shrank as well.
Right. Yeah. Dropped from 7.2 to 6.2% in the most recent data, and that's for October. If you think about what's happening in the nation, though, that report's for the middle of October. Now here we are almost in December, and things have gotten a lot worse. So when we see those November numbers, do worry that the gains that a lot of states have seen won't be as robust, and unfortunately, some might be reversing.
Yeah, is that going to recreate itself, that segment? Anyone, and Jeremy, we'll start with you. That entertainment segment and hospitality segment, the restaurant that closed 6 months ago, can it come back? Will there be another entrepreneur in its place?
Yeah, I think one of the saving graces of this is that, a lot of the capital, both the human capital and the physical capital, is still there, right? The kitchens are still there, the workers are still there, and they want to work. What's missing is the consumer demand. The names of the restaurants might change. Many restaurants have gone out of business permanently, but I think we can see that recovery once the consumer is confident and is willing to go spend money again in the way they did before any of us had heard of COVID.
Yeah. Let's go to Edward Haddock.
Yeah, so on that, absolutely a recovery is possible. When that's going to be is still subject to change. But I think, for what we look at, resiliency in that recovery is the goal for our small business community. You're absolutely right. When we look at the industry sector of hospitality tourism, by far those businesses have been impacted significantly more than our tech-enabled and our tech-ready enterprises, especially that have diversified footprints outside of the U.S. economy. So when we look at our small businesses and across Arkansas, we've got over 1,700 small businesses actively trading globally. We've got 47% of Arkansas is employed by a small business. So it is a big fabric of who we are as a community. I think what we're going to have to look at for any resilient business owner coming out the other side of this is their ability to respond, recover, and thrive in the new environment. Respond to what's happening right now, to recover and really take a good look at learning and emerging, where they're going to be or reposition themselves when we do reopen, and reopen more wholly, and then thrive, to prepare to really use technology to enable your business model and get outside of what you've normally done. One of my early conversations with Main Street, Arkansas, was really looking at our small business community in Main Street, where over 40% of our small businesses on Main Street are not enabled to have online or virtual sales. So with that limiting revenue factor, our businesses are already suffering a first-time blow without technology enablement. So we need to be able to make sure those that do recover and plan to thrive are technology enabled, so they can beat or live in a virtual world as we move forward.
You use the phrase new environment when we emerge into this new environment. What is that new environment? Expand on that, if you would. How do you see that new environment?
Well, absolutely. I think this is a shaking up the ant farm, if you will, right? It's teaching everyone out there that we thought we knew what could possibly happen, a new normal. Pandemics aren't going to go away in the future. We're always going to have to plan for disruption. I think the traditional planning environment where we went to and looked at natural disasters that had a defined beginning period and really a clearly defined end period were easier to deal with than these ongoing pandemic disasters that we're facing now. So when you look at, there is no clear beginning, there is no clear ending, it's uncertainty. So businesses are going to have to be able to react to that and understand how to not only monetize in the physical world, but help to monetize in a digital world.
Picking up on that, let's go back to Dr. Cochran. What we didn't, and Mr. Haddock referred to it just a second ago, but certainly the retail environment. The traditional brick and mortar, is it going to, when we do emerge from this particular period, is traditional brick and mortar retail, certainly on a small scale or a large scale for that matter, is it facing especially treacherous times now?
You see different parts of the industry positioning themselves to take care of the experiences that we have with Zoom and like what we're doing today with the virtual experience. There are going to be opportunities that are going to be created to that, and it is going to be different. Now some things, rather than traveling and in-person conferences and some of the spending that's associated with that may be reduced by our ability to do things virtually. Now, to enjoy a meal together, it's a little hard for me to get a great deal of pleasure of seeing a steak as opposed to consuming a steak, but there's going to be different opportunities there. In the concerns that we have, as well as looking at all 75 of our counties, and when you look at the dependence upon broadband access, there's going to hopefully be some improvements in some infrastructure that will come through with whatever stimulus and things that we have to try to create some greater opportunity across that. There's going to be some scale issues as to, if you look at Walmart, our world's largest food retailer, they're moving very heavily into a online service and de-emphasizing or trying to adjust what the traditional grocery store experience might be and trying to handle both off of it. But at smaller scales, there's going to be opportunities to move into that, and there's going to be some challenges there. So I think trying to capture the capital that we already have invested, the human capital that we're developing, and the new opportunities is going to be a real trick to how quickly we develop and how uniform it would be across the entire state and across all of our industries.
Yeah, Jeremy Horpedahl, are we in a position to adapt that quickly?
Well, I think we shouldn't ever underestimate the ability of businesses to adapt in the face of uncertainty. So I think we do have that ability. I think what's interesting to me is looking at things like curbside pickup at restaurants or at Walmart or Kroger. A lot of that they already have been doing that before the pandemic, so they kind of had that infrastructure in place to be able to do that. Just a lot of people hadn't used it before. So I think this shows how businesses are kind of in some ways positioned to deal with changes very quickly. But whether this is going to permanently change people's shopping habits, whether it's more online shopping, whether it means more not shopping in stores, but more delivery. I think whichever those it is, there are businesses that are well positioned to take advantage of whatever sort of demands consumers have in the future, and to make sure that our economy, while it may not look exactly like it did before, that it's performing at least a level that we think is comparable to the past.
Yeah, Edward Haddock, Dr. Cochran mentioned a second ago the connectivity issues and how prepared small town Arkansas and rural Arkansas is to take advantage of e-commerce. It's more crucial, it would appear, by the day.
Yeah, well, it was more crucial over years ago when we actually started breaking into the Netscape browser and the internet, and more every day we see the necessity of connectivity. Broadband and internet connection is going to give our small town retailers an open door to the globe, period. It's going to give them an opportunity to develop trade relationships and consumer relationships outside of small town rural Arkansas, where each of these businesses, if they're really wanting to survive in the long time and build a resilient business, is going to have to look beyond their zip code in order to find stable sales.
Let's go to trade if we can. It's expected, I think it is anticipated, that if there is a change in presidential administration, there are some trade and tariff issues both in the Pacific and the Atlantic regions. China is at the top of the list. Dr. Cochran, what's the farm community, and for that matter, the manufacturing community, what are they looking for? At least a little breathing room here? A reset?
Well, I think that if the Biden administration comes to be here, you're probably going to see a shift to where there's going to be a movement back to more multilateral trade agreements. They're probably to build some relationships that may not have been as strong as what would be liked. So I think that there be a tremendous shift. How quickly that can be done, what pressure and the motivations that led to the Trump administration policies, how they're still going to be addressed is going to be of concern. But I do think it will be different. Now, you probably have noticed that there's been a new Asian multilateral trade agreement that does not include the United States that was announced this last week. And so they're still trying to sort through just exactly what type of opportunities that's going to create for those countries that are participating into it, and what type of challenges for those that are not in that. And that includes not only the United States, but the other trading partners within the Americas that would be there. So this is an important issue, and particularly for agriculture, it's important when our soybeans markets. Many of our crops we're exporting half of what we grow off of it, and there are export opportunities even for our meat protein side of the equation with it. And so you take that trade, and then I want to come back to one of the things that Jeremy mentioned, is that through this pandemic, the mix of goods that has been purchased has shifted rather entirely. And there's been some real challenges for our poultry industry, particularly for those plants and the segments of the supply chain that were going into the fast foods and the food service industry. And while they were selling more chicken in grocery stores, it's a completely different process and product than what would be going into the service industry off of it. So there's trade, and there's a lot of these other issues that are all kind of blending together, and there's probably going to be some give and take as to which ones move in which direction at what time.
All right, Jeremy.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing with the regional trade agreement that Dr. Cochran just mentioned in Asia, crucially, that agreement involves China, and China was a major player in shaping that agreement. China and 14 other Asian nations. This is separate from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which was an agreement that the United States had been leading up until the Trump administration came in, and the United States withdrew from that agreement. And the worry was that there would be another agreement that would come in, and China would have more control over that. And I think that's what we've seen. So I think the United States does need to get back to the table in terms of these multilateral agreements and make sure that not only is the United States included in those agreements, but the United States has a role in shaping those and making sure that the United States is getting access to the markets we want, but also having access to the consumer products that are the other benefit of those agreements. So I do hope that the next administration does look more to going back to the kind of standard practice of the United States for the last 3 or 4 decades, which is to be the leader on these international trade agreements and to make sure that they benefit both U.S. businesses and U.S. consumers.
Well, whether it's overseas or domestic sales, Edward Haddock, you get the final word. We've got a few seconds remaining. Do you see opportunities for small business, niche business in Arkansas when we emerge from this?
Absolutely. As I said, I think innovation and that true sense of the American dream is still alive and present in every one of our small businesses out there. I think this is an opportunity for many of them to reflect on where they've been and what they've been doing, to restart that energy and that drive and that commitment to serving their customers, and to really look forward to revitalize under a new economy as we start to emerge out of this. And we will, together, we will get through this.
Mr. Haddock, Mr. Horpedahl, Dr. Cochran, all three of you, thank you very much for being part of our broadcast. Thank you for your insights. Come back soon.
Thank you.
And again, we hope that you are enjoying a safe and secure Thanksgiving holiday. We'll see you next week.
Support for Arkansas Week provided by the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, the Arkansas Times, and KUAR-FM 89.